Ho, 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 ho. I hear that bass, and it's like blood pumping. It's like machinery starting up. It's like the gears starting to move. It's like the thump, thump, thumpity thump of the old heart. This show is coming to life. It's like the gathering storm. It signals it's time for a show. A show. Another show. Yet another show in a lifetime of making shows. It's a funny way to make a living. Making shows. Wonder how many shows I've made in my life. My name's Mishky. I did my first show in the early 90s. My first radio show, did some puppet shows as a kid, and did some weird shows in the window as a teenager that the neighbors got concerned about. Hey, let's get back to what I was talking about. I did my first show in the early 90s. I remember it well. Over 30 years ago now. I was alone in a tiny studio for the very first time in my life. Just me. A small radio booth, just a little bigger than a closet. I liked that intimate cave off the muddy ditches of Highway 61 in a brick shack by a swamp beneath a giant glowing radio tower. Ho, ho, ho! I had driven my '62 Ford Galaxy 500 out there in the darkness. The building was empty, except for one lone guy at the board on the other side of that thick thermopane glass. That guy didn't take much interest in me, as I recall. He didn't know what to make of me, really. He came across to me as sort of a disheveled hippie, looking to find a career where he could get stoned, press a few buttons, and while away the night hours reading Mad Magazine or something. I think I threw him a couple of curveballs that night. I was just getting started back then, but I think I already was throwing some curveballs that the guys at the board didn't see coming, weren't ready for, didn't understand. AM radio was about to have its talk explosion, one final explosion for the AM side of the dial. The last great shout of AM was commencing before AM was going to move into hospice care. Yeah, it was all just getting going back then. It was a wild time to be alive in the radio business, the talk radio business. I saw nothing but possibility in all directions. What could one do with this little playground, a studio, a microphone, and out there in the hinterlands, a speaker, in some car, on some nightstand, in a garage? The possibilities were endless. That's what I learned. The possibilities were endless. I focused all of my energy on that one thing, radio. That was the be-all and the end-all, the alpha and the omega. It's astounding what you can do when you focus on just one thing, audio, the voice, the microphone and the speaker. That was over 30 years ago, that night. I think that guy working the board called management the next day, and he asked if he could hang it up. He went on to work at a photomat booth. Do you remember photomat booths, where you drive up and drop off your camera film, and then they would process it? He thought that would be more entertaining than watching me through the glass. So he quit after one night. I'm sure somewhere he's out there still, stoned, reading Mad Magazine. There's a woman I'm going to talk to this hour. She, too, has focused on just one thing. I'm going to call her at her place of work, far, far, far away from here. The connection will go from my little studio here, my little room, my little closet, across the Midwest, across the Southwest, across a corner of Mexico, out into the Pacific Ocean, and then miles and miles and miles across that brilliant blue sea until that connection reaches New Zealand. And there I will talk to her about her passion, her love, about her one thing, spiders. Spiders. A woman who devotes her life to that one thing. When one does that, oh, the things that can be discovered. That's her one thing, folks, spiders. And you will never again think of spiders the same way. Do you have a one thing? Do you people have a one thing, that one thing you focus on? You remember Jack Palance in City Slickers, don't you? What was his character's name in City Slickers? I can't recall. He was talking to Billy Crystal. They were both on horses. They were out in that beautiful, wide-open western wilderness there, riding on their horses under a blue sky as Jack gave Billy a little insight.
Do you know what the secret of life is?
No, what?
One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and everything else don't mean shit.
That's great, but what's the one thing?
That's what you gotta figure out.
So what's your one thing, people? Do you have one? Have you heard of the book titled Do Just One Thing by Danny Seo? Or the book by Dr. Michael Mosley called Just One Thing? Have you read the latest article in Science Journal, headlined, The Scientific Argument for Mastering One Thing? Or this article here from Psychology Magazine, The Power of Doing Only One Thing. Says here, too often we spread our energy too thin by going after too many things. As a result, we don't end up achieving much at all. There's an old Russian proverb, if you chase two rabbits, you won't catch either one. You gotta chase but the one rabbit. That's the secret, they say. Do one thing, do it every day, and do it for years. And oh, the magic you will be able to create. But you gotta focus. The one thing strategy is a time-tested approach, according to this guy, Gary Geller. He wrote another book. His is called The One Thing Approach. How many books are there on this? Gary says you can succeed at anything in life as long as that anything is your one thing. Sounds simple, but putting it into practice can be a challenge. That's because we tend to lose interest in things very quickly. And in this modern age, our short attention spans don't really help us out much. But when you look at all the greats, when you study all the greats throughout history, you begin to understand the power of the one thing. Gary says quantity is the most predictable path to quality. He says if you want to be original, the most important thing you can do is do a lot of work, do a huge volume of work. Picasso amassed over 1,800 paintings in his lifetime, 1,800, but only a fraction were praised, only a fraction were acclaimed. Shakespeare, he produced 37 plays and 154 sonnets, but only 5 became famous. They both produced a lot of work, Shakespeare and Picasso, but they also focused on one single thing. Picasso painted, Shakespeare wrote. Remember Bruce Lee? I like to call him Kato. He was Kato on the Green Hornet when I was growing up. I liked that better than Bruce Lee. I just don't think Bruce is the name of a martial arts guy. Bruce. Bruce is a good name for a porn star. My apologies to Springsteen. But Bruce, I don't know, as a name, I've always had images in my mind. There's always a mustache there, and then I don't know what else is going on, but I don't care to spend a lot of time there. So I never went with Bruce Lee. I went with Kato. Remember Kato? Remember what he said? He said, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. I don't think he talked the way I am talking, but that's the way I want him talking right now. Mastery and success come from pursuing one thing and doing it for many years. So what's your one thing, folks? Do you have one? What's the one thing you really want to focus your energy on? We all have a limited amount of energy. If we chase too many things, we drown our energy, clutter our minds. Chaos. Chaos is what we end up with. If we learn to direct our energy into one thing, we can go far, amazingly far. Choose something you love, people, because you'll need that. You'll need that care and that conviction of loving something to keep you going on the inevitable days when you'll feel like giving up, when you'll feel like quitting. Choose something you love, one thing. One thing. Coming up after this break, a woman whose one thing is spiders.
It's a magazine for fans of radio shows. Look, here's an article on the Spider Lady.
When you're injured because some no-good knucklehead nitwit has made your life miserable, either through a car accident, a boating accident, a slip and fall, or some other form of carelessness and recklessness, maybe something unfortunate that happened at work. I mean, there are so many ways others can mess up and leave us injured unfairly. Some bone-headed moon calf dunderpate screws up, you end up being the one who pays. But you can turn the tables. You can make them pay. I call it payback. I trademarked that. That's my phrase, payback. All you have to do is call Bradshaw and Bryant, and they can get you the financial compensation package to make your world whole once again. Bradshaw and Bryant, they have focused on one thing, and they do it better than anyone else. They know the law. Find them at minnesotapersonalinjury.com. Himani Nelson is a professor of animal behavior at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. Devotes her life to the study of spiders. I like spiders, always have, even as a boy, especially as a boy. When I saw her book, The Lives of Spiders, I wanted to be a spider when I was a kid. The Lives of Spiders, a natural history of the world's spiders. Himani Nelson, thank you so much for being here. What was it originally? What got you to want to spend so much time with spiders? Was it because you realized in your work, anytime you look closer at those small things in nature, they just become more and more fascinating? Or was it because there was this big hole in the research? Someone had forgotten to really study spiders, and you were looking for a gig, and so you went with that. What prompted all of this?
I guess the part that I love about my job is the fact that, yes, as you point out, when you look in depth at something, it's just so much more interesting. And I have the opportunity that many people don't have to be able to do that. But I first started working on spiders really because I wanted to work with a particular person during my master's degree. And he worked on spiders. I had no special interest in spiders, but I really liked his approach to the natural world. And as soon as I started working with the spiders, it was just like, wow.
When I say that I find spiders so wildly complex and fascinating, I honestly mean in a way I would never say about dogs. And Americans love their dogs, and I love dogs, and we think of dogs as something that we would love to learn more about and be around more. I just have a hard time feeling a book about dogs would be this interesting. And I mean in the way spiders, layer after layer, deliver surprises and wonders and jaw-dropping moments, insights that just leave you aghast. That was the delight in reading your book, and you benefit from the sheer variety.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you so much for saying that. First of all, I mean, I think my job's done if that's what you say about the book and about spiders. But I do have to point out that there are more species of spiders in one family than there are all mammals. So there is a lot more to play with than just dogs. And they never cease to surprise and impress.
I did have trouble finding out what really is behind the fear. I believe you mentioned the fear of spiders is generally greater in the population than the fear of virtually any other creature?
Yeah, that's right. It seems to be the single biggest animal phobia. And I really haven't found a convincing explanation for why that might be. When you talk to people, they say, oh, it's because they move fast or because they're hairy. It's a body plan which is quite alien to us, but so is the body plan of a crayfish. So I just have yet to find an explanation that I find really convincing. But there's no doubt that there is a large phobia. And I do think that it's largely driven by peers or by parents, because kids, before they go to school, if they don't have phobic parents, love spiders. I often get 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds so excited to meet me and wanting to come to the spider lab and see the spiders, and they're quite happy to handle the spiders. But as soon as they go to school, it's all over. Apart from one small group, they all do have venom. It's just that the venom won't affect humans for a few reasons. The toxins don't affect mammals because we're not their prey, or simply because they can't actually pierce through human skin.
I guess if I'm going to start somewhere, I'll start here with the predatory behavior. I tried to figure out, looking at your book, there's way too much that's interesting than we could ever get to in this interview. So I'll start with the predatory part. Every spider has venom.
Apart from one small group called Eulaborids, which is one family of spiders, which doesn't have that many species. But apart from that small group, all spiders have venom.
And the only other couple of things we can say where we can be fairly comfortable, this covers all spiders can create silk,
Yes, we can definitely say that.
but all spiders don't create webs.
Yeah, in fact, only a minority do. That's one of the surprising things that kind of comes across in this book. And to be honest, when I was writing the book, I study spiders, and I was taken aback by that.
Yeah, that really threw me. The sheer variety of webs was crazy enough, but the fact that it was a minority threw me. We can say they all have 8 legs.
We can say they all have 8 legs, they all create silk, and they've all got 2 body parts. And that's pretty much the only thing that we can say with any consistency across all spiders.
And that's the delightful thing. I mean, the wondrous thing about the book is then the whole world opens up because there's variety in all directions. I mean, the eyes alone, in some cases, 4 pair of eyes.
That's the majority of cases, in fact.
4 pair of eyes. I am convinced 1/100th of 1% listening to this would know that. And then when you get into how good the eyesight can be in some of these cases, there was one spider where you talked about the eyesight being greater with this spider than with a cheetah.
One group of jumping spiders, but all jumping spiders have what we would call spatial acuity or visual resolution, better than a cat. But there's one genus in particular that's pretty phenomenal. They can see to a resolution that's not overly dissimilar to ourselves.
If you go back 380 million years, you can find what you would refer to as the first true spiders. You would have to go 150 million years later before you would find the first dinosaur. And you would have to go 225 million years after that to get to people. These things have been doing their thing on this planet for a long time and evolving for a long time. But even with that, I find myself wondering why certain evolutionary characteristics exist. I don't understand the prevalence of cannibalism with spiders. By that, I mean, I don't know why that was necessary, that needed to be a part of their lives.
It's interesting. I've been asked that a few times, and I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, I would argue that they are quite nutritionally good for each other in the sense that they have the exact nutrients that they need. Um, and I argue that basically because I rear spiders, and sometimes the easiest way to rear spiders is to let the baby spiderlings eat each other, because the ones that survive are really fit and healthy and fat and well. They've got really good nutrition, and if you give them flies or other food, they just are not as healthy. But that again is based on my rearing spiders. I don't have a good answer for you in terms of why it is that there is the prevalence of cannibalism that there is. Having said that, They have quite a reputation for being cannibalistic, but actually they're not quite as cannibalistic as their reputation might suggest. There are a few species for sure where the females will often, if not most of the time, eat the male who is trying to mate with her, which is unfortunate for the male. And any spider will opportunistically kind of, kill another spider and get a meal. But actually, to be fair, they don't tend to. It's not like they're typically going out to hunt other spiders unless there's a specific predatory prevalence of that particular behavior. And there are some groups of spiders that do hunt other spiders, no, not typically their own species.
But most cannibalism in spiders would be during or immediately after copulation, right?
Apart from siblings eating each other when they're very young, those two instances would be the majority.
I was just trying to figure out why males would continually come back in the evolutionary process to anything that would create that kind of danger for them. I just don't. Can you help me understand that?
If there are more males than there are females in the population, then basically the male who can absolutely guarantee paternity, if you like, is winning, because the females often will not mate more than once. They will only mate once. A male that can do anything to try and improve his chances that her eggs will be fertilized by his sperm then has a selective advantage. And sometimes it is believed that some of the sexual cannibalism in some species where the male actually literally feeds himself to the female, it is so that essentially the female has a lot of time while she's munching away at him for his sperm to inseminate her eggs.
Male dark fishing spiders die spontaneously during sex. That's the Nelson Rockefeller way to go here in the United States. A female spider in some species will let herself be devoured by her spiderlings. There has been some suggestion that part of that is a piece of where people end up with these fears of spiders or this sense that there's something dark and menacing about them, this particular behavior. There has been also some speculation that another little piece has to do with the way they move. Can you give us a little insight into what people might mean when they say, look at the way they move? What are they seeing?
Well, first of all, they're seeing the coordination of 8 legs that can propel a spider pretty fast when it wants to. And one of the reasons that they can move quite fast, and it's almost robotic in some ways, is because they don't have, when we move our arm or our knee, we've got muscles that extend the arm and then flex the arm. And it's a nice smooth motion. But with spiders, they actually have hydraulic power, essentially. So they shunt their blood, which is called hemolymph, and then that rapidly extends the legs.
When I would read something like this, is just from your book here. Unlike most other animals, spiders use a lightweight hydraulic system to straighten their legs and combine this with immense power and sensitivity. The mechanics of spider locomotion has been used to develop soft actuators, the parts of a machine that convert energy into mechanical force, enabling movement. The speed and pivotal flexibility of the hydraulically propelled jumps of jumping spiders are used to develop lightweight robots for jobs requiring high pressure and fast motion, such as for hydraulic pistons and for safe grasping tasks in robot-human interactions. More recent work is exploring spider-inspired soft robotics as prosthesis. They're working on this with artificial limbs?
Quite a big area of research because spiders are very, very strong. They can carry many, many times their own body weight for hours on end and be not worried about it at all. And yet they also are very delicate in the way they do everything. And so if you could convert those two particular properties, what better than a prosthesis that's like that?
Yeah, so I start to combine these things, this extraordinary way they move, the way we can learn so much from them and take parts of what they do and work it into our world of mechanics, the extraordinary stories of their eyesight. And it goes on and on. You come across one spider that I just would have argued was impossible to exist out there, could not be possible. And that is the spider that does all its hunting underwater.
Yeah, the diving bell spider. It's amazing. Yeah. They carry their own little scuba gear, basically.
It spends most of its life underwater where it hunts aquatic invertebrates, air breathing. Uh, this is where I don't even understand, again, evolutionarily, why this would be necessary. It learned to build a web between aquatic plants, and in order to go down there and survive without air, to create a diving bell, a kind of large bubble made of silk that it could get inside and stay breathing within, and then periodically go back and get more air into the diving bell when needed, right?
Where there's a will, there's a way, evolutionarily speaking. I mean, web silk is hydrophobic in the sense that it repels water. So if you build a, let's call it a web that happens to be kind of a balloon shape, and it's in the water, and then you've got air, then you can actually literally go underwater and not have that competition that's just on the side of the streams, for example. And you don't have the competition, and you've got basically that food source to yourself. So I can see how evolution might favor that when you've got competition in streams.
To go through all that effort to create a diving bell so you can go down underwater and survive there and create this little pocket of air and do your hunting, would it have perhaps also been the case that you would have had fewer predators down there?
Yeah, you would expect that.
The web sizes, when you say webs can be the size of a truck, what are we talking about here? Size of a truck.
They can be 15 meters high, spanning trees, many trees, and 20 meters wide, for example. So they can be huge, absolutely massive.
We have in our head this classic two-dimensional image of a web, but there's such variety. There's a web that looks like the main big top tent in a circus, except in miniature. So these elaborate three-dimensional, wondrous structure-looking webs.
Those are actually really, really common. They're quite small often, and so people don't notice them. I'd say that they're probably the single most common web that I probably tend to come across.
The weird thing that I would have said was impossible was the decoration of webs. Can you explain what is meant by decoration? In some cases, actually bringing in decorative additional items, and in some cases, decorating with the silk itself, right?
Yeah, so there are two types of decoration that can be used by certain groups of spiders. One is silk based, and those can be very beautiful. They can be in zigzags and X's, radial things like a spiral. The function of this is still debated after hundreds of years. But then other groups of spiders will actually bring in leaves, and they will decorate their webs with leaves, or in fact, even their dead prey, like prey that they've eaten, instead of dropping it out of the web, which most spiders would do, they actually string it into the web. And those are thought to maybe act as decoys. So the idea is that maybe a bird or some other animal that might be potentially going to attack the spider instead attacks one of these dead prey or a leaf, providing the spider with a little bit more opportunity to survive because there are lots of decoys there, essentially.
The diameter of some types of silk more than 20 times narrower than a human hair. So it's really thin, and yet these webs can catch large prey. I would not have known without reading your book that they can catch birds. And this silk staying intact after being hit by things, big things, has to do with this extraordinary makeup of this material. Steel is firm, you write, but it has very little elasticity. A rubber band is elastic, but when stretched too much, it breaks. Silk is unmatched when it comes to how effectively it combines these two opposing properties in a single material. Silk structures intercept prey, absorb the energy of the prey's momentum as it crashes into it, and then transmits vibrations that allow the spider to locate the prey and hold on to it. But it gets more intricate and complex than that. The silk becomes what is normally in the interior of a creature. It is a sensing mechanism. It is almost like a part of their brain.
Yeah, I love that. I actually really like that. I mean, they're such small animals and they can do remarkable things. And I think part of it is because they've externalized a lot of their biology is external to their body, even their digestion. I mean, they actually digest outside of their body. A lot of their sensory system is the web. So they are essentially like a giant antenna, if you like, around the body. And that antenna is detecting tiny little things. It's like, I don't know, their own little satellite dish, which provides them with data. And they can interpret that data absolutely perfectly.
I have to believe, as people who are peers of yours and operate in other areas learn about the sheer variety that you get to bathe in, I imagine some from time to time must say something like, I didn't know that. I might have looked into those spiders 25 years ago when I got into this business. I mean, have you had people, colleagues at all, ever say to you, I would not have dreamed there was that vault waiting to be entered with this creature?
I would say everybody, every single one of us who studies spiders now would say that even 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had a clue how vastly complicated and diverse they would have been.
When you delve into your book, it's just page after page of, wait, what's next? Including, you're going to have to help me with the name of this one. What's the name of the one that does the extraordinary? I'm going to try to find it here because what you wrote about it was so great. The one that does the dance.
The peacock spider?
Yeah, the peacock spider.
There are several species in this group, and they are all spectacular.
Legs are waved in time with the artful presentation of a slew of red, blue, green, and orange colors on swiveling folds that unfurl like fans from their abdomen. Music of the dance produced by abdominal fluttering. How does an observing female react? Well, if she is not impressed, she lifts and wiggles her abdomen, signaling disinterest. Until that happens, the male's aim is to get the female's rapt attention. If she turns and looks away, he changes rapidly from the visual dance to singing through seismic signals. Once her attention is drawn back to the male, he once again pivots to the visual elements of his courtship, since these and the vigor with which he shakes his colorful peacock like fans seem to persuade her to mate.
They've got like feathery protuberances across that fan, and they wave them around and they dance, raise their legs, and move them in a very coordinated fashion. So they're using motion and they're using an array of colors, which is overwhelming, and contrasts, which is overwhelming. It is mind blowing. And for a poor little female spider seeing that in front of her, it must be just like, ah.
There is a spider that when there's a predator nearby or when it senses trouble can go into a vibrating state, moving so rapidly it almost becomes invisible.
Those ones are really common. Those are the daddy longlegs spiders that a lot of us probably have in the corner of some room or other in our houses. They're called whirling spiders quite often because they literally whirl and you just can't see them.
You compared it to a propeller on a plane.
We lose sight of the actual spider. It whirls so quickly that our visual system cannot keep up essentially with the speed of the motion of the spider.
The speed of spiders, again, there's a whole bunch of reading you can do just on the speed. I think there's another one that if a predator is approaching, it curls up into a ball and can roll down sand dunes at over 100 yards a second. It's impossible for me to fathom. The last area I want to go into is an area I would have assumed would be impossible with these creatures, and that is their cognitive abilities. No one would have been able to predict what's being learned about the work of their, can I say brain?
Absolutely.
Spiders have the ability to learn, have a certain cognition. They're not operating solely on instinct. They can plan.
That's right. That's quite overwhelming. And I love studying this because I design experiments and I'll spend weeks agonizing about how to design an experiment to essentially test the limits of what they can do. And then they outwit me.
I picture discovery after discovery after discovery that you don't see coming, sort of leaving you sometimes sort of dizzy.
Yeah, almost catatonic.
I hope those of you listening will go out and seek out this book, The Lives of Spiders, A Natural History of the World's Spiders. I haven't even touched the incredibly beautiful photography. And you cannot imagine the variety in these spiders. And I don't know where you find anything else like this. I had never encountered anything, and I spent a lot of time in bookstores. So I'm so delighted you put your time and energy into this, and I hope it's a smash success. And thank you for taking the time to speak to us from New Zealand.
Oh, thank you, Tommy. That's great. And I'm amazed that you picked up a spider book, to be honest. So well done. And thank you very much for reading it and for enjoying it.
Absolutely.
That's been really fun.
All right, there's the placaters. The placaters. Thanks for that groove. Thanks to Himani Nelson, the world's great spider expert, for appearing all the way from New Zealand. Her one thing, people, spiders. She found it. And not everyone's one thing is as cool as that. I look at people's one thing from time to time. Some puzzle me. I think often of Mr. Don Gorski of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. He was a shoe shine guy back in 1972, when at the age of 18 he bought his daddy's old car and went to get a Big Mac for the first time in his life. And he has not eaten anything else since. He has lived on Big Macs, and Big Macs only, since May 17th, 1972. Today I received a letter in the mail from Don Gorski of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, inviting me to Fond du Lac on March, 15th? Let's see what we got here. Here's Don's invite. Mishki, you're cordially invited to the eating of my 35,000th Big Mac. Don's going to have his 35,000th Big Mac, and he wants me to be there along with some other folks. He says, come on down to 699 South Military Road in Fond du Lac. Saturday, March 15th, around 2 p.m., I'll eat my Big Mac. I'll hand you your own little free coupon to get your own Big Mac, Mishki, and you can join me. Remember when we had our Big Mac together in my kitchen? Park across the street from the McDonald's, and please be careful crossing Military Avenue. It's a busy road. Do I want to travel across the state of Wisconsin on March 15th and watch Don eat his 35,000th Big Mac? He eats 2 a day, 1 for lunch, 1 for dinner, and that is all he eats and all he has eaten for a very, very, very long time. I did have a Big Mac with him a decade ago. I sat in his kitchen there in Fond du Lac on a winter day, staring out into his backyard at a life-size statue of Ronald McDonald. We each had a Big Mac. Don also had a Coke. He drinks 6 Cokes a day at least and has for over half a century. He's over 70 years old. He's doing fine. He's healthy. He's happy. Here's a little snippet of my visit with Don from years ago. Don found his one thing.
One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and everything else don't mean shit.
It's kind of like you have chocolate for the first time or something. It's hard to describe it because I couldn't get enough of them at first, and hamburger to me was just the perfect food. I personally remember when I was younger and then I heard that McDonald's was coming out with the Big Mac, I'm sitting there like, someday I'm going to eat them like crazy. I just knew it. At that time I'd ordered 3 Big Macs and a Coke, and then there was no state sales tax at the time, and they were 49 cents. So it was, Coke was a dime, I believe, at the time, so it was $1.57 flat, no tax or nothing. For a whole $1.57, I went on the car and chomped down my 3 Big Macs, and then I did my shoe shining thing, and then I went back to McDonald's, got 3 more, another $1.57, went back to work, and then worked until middle of summer. I had to stay almost till 10 o'clock. But then McDonald's was open until 11, so I could still go there and get 3 more. And that's what I would do after work, get 3 more Initially, I was eating 9 a day just because I couldn't help myself. I took that first bite and it's like, man, this is the best food in the world. Just the perfect food.
You couldn't imagine having anything else. This was going to be what you were going to live on.
Right, that's what was my thinking. And it went that way for, quite some time. Of course, your body just naturally says, I'm not eating 9 a day anymore. All of a sudden, I'm down to 5, down to 4, and then gradually get down to where I'm eating 2 or 3 a day, which is more normal.
Choose something you love, one thing. Right, Jack Palance? One thing. I knew a bank robber years ago. He's now long gone. He was an interesting fella, spent his life robbing banks. That was his one thing. His name was Charles Easy Ekman. He decided early on in life to become a bank robber, and he was prolific, and he was proficient, and he was laser-focused. The only time he would ever get caught, and he would get caught, and he would serve time, only to get out and return to bank robbing, the only time he'd get caught was when someone he robbed a bank with turned state's evidence, got caught and turned state's evidence, getting a lighter sentence for himself by fingering Easy Ekman. I met Easy long after he had retired, and he did formally retire. As an older man, he retired from bank robbing. I met him in a senior high-rise facility where he was loved by all the old women, and they all knew him as Easy, the retired bank robber. This was many years ago. I'd visit him, and I'd sit and listen, and he talked about his long bank-robbing life. He had mouth cancer at the time. He was dying. It had metastasized. It affected his speech. But he was quite cheerful, and I would sit and BS with him. I'd put an old cassette player between us and record our conversation, and I just marveled at the man.
I've been shot twice, shot at, stabbed a few times, some knife fights, beaten, left for dead. One time we came out of Atlanta, Georgia. Somehow the alarm went off. I had a brand new Buick, up the hills, down the hills. I'm going about 120. Next day in the paper, you would read what they said. They put 42 bullet holes in that car. I got buckshot in my neck and back. We'd go in and I'd get this shotgun out. Boom! Get on the floor. You got to scare them. You got to scare people. He would get the money out of the drawers.
Why were you always the gunman?
That's just the way it worked out. That's all. Always. The thing about this, we had a M.O. We never hurt anybody. Never. Never shot nobody, never hurt nobody in all them years.
When you walked into a bank, did you always pull the trigger on the gun to get everybody's attention?
No, not always. Depending on how many people were in there, what they kind of looked like. We robbed 2 banks in New York one Saturday morning. Robbed 2 of them. Kind of funny about one of them. He's getting the money, and I got the shotgun, and this song was playing. The shadow of your smile. I said, who's the boss here? Who's the boss? This little chubby guy puts his arm up, shaking. I said, come here. Turn that goddamn music off. The next day, we'd always get the paper. And a headline said, armed robber hates music.
That was Easy Ekman's one thing, bank robbing. I'm more of a white-collar crime guy myself. I can't get into it right now, but as I like to say, catch me if you can. I knew a coffin maker years ago. He lived in my neighborhood. He built coffins, wooden coffins. Nice fella. Had a little storefront coffin shop down the block. That's all he made. Only thing he did, just focused on wooden coffins. It was his one thing. You walked in his front door, the little bell would ring just like any typical retail operation. And there he'd be, making his coffins. It's the damnedest thing. There were coffins all around. You could walk up to him, check the price tag. I visited him with a recorder, BS'd with him a little bit about his life making coffins.
I got a lot of interest. people stopping in and curious.
What are they curious about?
A lot of people's reaction to this was like I reinvented the wheel. Well, I just dug up the wheel and represented it. I mean, this was what people expected 70 years going back. I mean, it was handmade wooden coffins. A lot of times in small towns and not so small towns, the local furniture guy who made a lot of his own furniture would also cobble together coffins. Well, I just kind of brought that back. I had a family in here last week who were looking at my product, and their choice was something that I could offer them or a $1,600 rental for a 2-hour wake.
$1,600 rental. That is a good business to go into. $1,600, 2 hours.
It's an expensive party at that point. I had a family in here a couple of years ago going back, and they said it was a 5-figure rental out in Arizona.
And your coffins run
$500 to $800.
Okay. What kind of experiences have you had one-on-one with people coming in the door?
It tends to be the guys, and they come in various shades of yellow and gray, and they have a finite amount of time left on the earth, and they're picking out their caskets. That's a pretty humbling experience. I've always thought of it as taking control at a time when they're losing the ultimate control. I had a woman in, and she's got a 5-inch tumor on her aorta, and any day that thing could rupture, and, she picked out the one that she wanted. One of these gentlemen, he brought in his wife who was in perfect health and such, and he was trying to get her to commit to buying one. And it was his way of just taking care of her, and she was mortified by the idea, repelled by the idea. I have sold to people who have stated that they were going to be cremated, and they, in effect, didn't want to face the flames. It's a fascinating thing because it's so personal.
One thing. Finding your one thing in life. It can be tricky. Where's your true passion? Have you found it? Of course, every now and then, there are these freaks. There are these freaks who say, yeah, Mishk, I focus on 10 things, and I do them all pretty well. Very, very unusual to find those folks. So unusual, they're generally well known. They're famous the world over. Ben Franklin, for instance. Try getting Ben Franklin to do one thing. Ben, stick with printing. You're good at running a printing shop. Stay with it. But I want to be a founding father. I want to secure America's independence. I want to help form the first government. I want to be an author. I want to be a politician. I want to be an inventor, a scientist, a scholar, a philosopher, a diplomat. And I'm going to do them all well. Ben, damn it, I'm not going to say it again. Focus on one thing. Paul McCartney focused on one thing, music. That's it. And look what he accomplished. What if half the time he had said, well, music's good part of the day, but I'm going to use the other half to pursue my passion to be Liverpool's #1 pest control guy? What would we have ended up with in the form of music? My guess, John Denver. All Neil Armstrong ever wanted to be was an astronaut. That's it. That's all he longed to be. What if he chased another rabbit as well? What if he also wanted to run a beautiful colonial bed and breakfast in Vermont with his mother, Grace? Neil, can you pick up the lace curtains today? Well, Mom, actually, no, I can't. I have to spend the day in a flight simulator. Neil? We talked about this. I told you to focus on one thing. Now drop that astronaut nonsense. Well, let's go to the phones, huh? Let's go to the phones and talk to the people. Always good to check in with people. I'm locked into this little studio here. It's dark. I'm alone. And the people are out there. I know they're out there. And I'm going to find them. I'm going to go searching for them. And I'm going to talk to them.
Hello, Matt here.
Matthew,
Yeah,
it's Mishky.
Mishky, how are you doing?
Good. What are you up to?
I was just doing some plumbing with my son earlier.
Is that your one thing that you've devoted your life to?
Yeah, pretty much. I was going to go in insurance sales, and I decided, you know what? Plumbing's a lot funner. It's tangible. It's right there. People call me when they need me, and they're happy when I leave.
I think you dodged a bullet not going with insurance sales. I don't know that you'd be alive still today. And when I say that, I mean you'd be dead at your own hands.
I tend to agree with you there.
There may be little kids who say, when I grow up, I want to be an insurance salesman. Haven't found one yet. But I'll tell you something. There's all sorts of kids who love messing around under the sink. My brother used to drink the stuff under there, and boy, would he get in trouble. Many, many trips to the hospital in an ambulance, but he liked it under there. It was like his little playroom. And my parents, knowing that, still stored all that nasty stuff under there, and he'd drink it and go to the hospital, and today he's a zombie.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it's not good.
They weren't parents of the year. I gotta tell you, though, in the old days, I used to hear stories. This was back in the 70s. I used to hear stories of some pretty wild stuff that happened with plumbers going into houses of private people. I mean, there'd be some interesting encounters, unusual behavior, and some things got a little bit, I don't want to go too much into it, but you have stuff like that ever?
I think the strangest thing I run into was we were in public bathrooms, a public women's bathroom. We were doing some work above the ceiling, and we had our carts in front of the door and signs that, don't come in, men working. And when you know it, I'm above the ceiling waiting for my partner to hand me a pipe, and in comes a lady, bulldozes right past him into the stall right below me, and has at it while I'm sitting there. And there's nothing I can do.
Well, there was something you could do. You could have had some fun. I certainly would not say there was nothing to do there. There were about 9 things to do, and you could pick from them various entertaining things you could have done. I don't know what you had with you that you could have dropped on her head, or sounds you could have made, funny little sounds, animal sounds. I mean, we are never without options when we get into these situations. Sometimes to do nothing is the big mistake.
Well, it was going all right until she looked up, and then I kind of froze, and I don't remember much after that.
There's an ideal thing to do there. There's the perfect thing. We're not finding it.
No, it's a tough one. You're 10 feet in the air, ceiling tiles open below you, and you got one view, and that's it.
You know what you do there? You say what nurses say when they see your popo. When they see you without any underwear on, and they say, oh, I've seen a bunch of those. You yell down to her, I've been around plumbing all my life. I've seen that, what you got right there, at least one other time. You wouldn't be able to say you saw it all that often, but maybe one other time. Maybe it was a family member. Well, I've enjoyed visiting with you.
Same here, Mishky.
I hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay, so long.
This is Joe Lossing. Please leave a message.
The mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages at this time. Goodbye.
How many people are trying to get a hold of you and leaving messages, and they're piling up like mail outside your front door when you're on vacation, and no one gets to leave anything for you? You don't know how many people are trying to get a hold of you because your box is all filled up. What is the point of even having voicemail now? What happens if I show up at your front door? Can I even find your house through the shrubbery? Then when I get inside, will it be all dark, just a maze of garbage bags? I have to work my way through finding you in the back room, alone in the corner with a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. What happened to you? You're not a typical listener, are you? You gave me your number. You said I could call. Who are you? What are you? You're a hoarder, a loner, a lost soul. One of my great listeners, and I'm so glad to have you. Couldn't make it without you. I built my damn career on people like you. God bless you! Boom chicka doo tuck doo chaka chaka doo tuck ba da doo doo da da da. Rode into town on a crippled horse. Got fired from a cattle drive way up north. Want to smoke a Marlboro, ride in a dump truck, pop me a cold brew, talk about my hard luck, dirty up my blue jeans, build in a new shed, beat up my best friend, leave him lying half dead.
Hello.
Hello there, John.
Mishki.
Yeah.
Wow. Hi.
Weren't expecting my call?
Not at this very minute, no.
I understand.
But it's a welcome surprise.
Well, I like to surprise people. I don't like to plan these things. That's no fun. The spontaneity is the true spice of life, don't you think?
True, I agree.
What am I catching you doing, speaking of spontaneity?
I'm this is going to sound very strange, but I'm putting my merch together. I sell T-shirts of myself and other things due to my work in pro wrestling. So
you're
souvenir shirts and the like.
You're a pro wrestler?
I'm not a pro wrestler. I'm a pro wrestling ring announcer, and still people wear my name and or image on their chests on T-shirts. So it's weird, but I don't know how I got here, but I'm here.
You are the first pro wrestler announcer I've ever spoken to. So give me an example of what a pro wrestling announcement would sound like.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from right here in beautiful St. Paul, Minnesota, it is T.D. Mishki. Basically like that.
Are you doing these in the small little wrestling operations around town that I hear about?
There's a number of them around town. We're the biggest. We are based out of actually the First Avenue, the nightclub in downtown Minneapolis. But we do shows all over the place.
You wrestle at First Avenue?
Yeah.
Bloody rain, bloody rain.
Pretty much.
I was just talking about how people need to find or should find their one thing in life, that one thing, that one passion. It sounds like you found it.
I think I did. Yeah, it took me a while, but I think I did. I kind of lost my way for a while when I got to be a little older, discovered girls, but found my way back eventually.
People make the mistake of saying finding girls causes you to lose your way. That is the way. That's the way.
I suppose.
Yeah. I did read, however, when I was researching all this pick one thing stuff, I did read the number one mistake people make is thinking they have to find their one thing in their 20s or find their one thing in their 30s. Sometimes you have to do some living and discover your passion through doing some living. And then when you find it, it doesn't matter when it is. That's the Holy Grail. You have the one thing. Where could I maybe come see you do your work sometime soon?
We have a show on the 28th, the Friday the 28th.
All right.
That's at the Lynn Lake VFW, the James Valentine VFW. Tickets are on sale at the door to go there. And then in June we'll be back at First Avenue for WrestlePalooza, and in September we'll be at the Mall of America and a bunch of outdoor brewery shows in between.
All right, wonderful. Well, I hope to run into you sometime. Great talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mishki.
You be well. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening this week, folks. I'll talk to you again next time, eh? Will you come back? I'll be here in a week. You come find me. We'll talk some more. I look forward to that. Goodbye for now.